It is not just a State of the Union night amid the start of an historic war in Europe. Tonight is also the official start of the 2022 midterm elections. Voters in Texas went to the polls today to cast their votes in primary races for state and federal offices. Those races will determine who the Democratic and Republican candidates will be this November. For the latest on those races, I want to turn to MSNBC's Steve Kornacki over at the big board. Steve, what's happening in Texas?
Well, I can tell you some of the members of Congress who Joe Biden was addressing tonight while he was giving that speech find themselves currently in political crises back in their home districts. Let's start right here in the 28th District of Texas. This is South Texas. You can see it's the district highlighted here, spanning San Antonio down to Laredo along the U.S.-Mexico border. The incumbent here, Henry Cuellar, a Democrat. He's been there for almost 20 years. He's one of the more conservative Democrats in Congress. He's a hawk on the border. He's anti-abortion. He represents some portions here. Some of these counties along the border got a lot of attention after the 2020 election, where they had swung 20, 30, 40 points away from the Democrats in the Biden-Trump race. Well, here's Henry Cuellar right now trailing Jessica Cisneros, a progressive primary challenger. Cisneros comes in with an endorsement from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a lot of national progressive groups. Cisneros had challenged Cuellar for this seat 2 years ago, came within 4 points. Cuellar has found himself. There was an FBI raid of his office, of his home within the last several months. There's an investigation that he says will clear him, but has certainly clouded this campaign. Right now, Cisneros is leading in the vote count. Two important things to keep in mind, however. One big key to this county, Starr County, right on the border. We don't have results in yet in our tabulations there. We're expecting Cuellar to do very well there. So a big batch of Cuellar votes not yet reflected in this total. Cuellar also the same day vote. I'll give you Webb County. This is where Laredo is. This is the base of Henry Cuellar. Again, you see there's a lot of votes still to be counted in this county here. Another opportunity here, I think, for Cuellar to pick up a lot of votes. The other area that's left is there's a portion of Bexar County. That's where San Antonio is. Bexar County has been delivering, you can see, in huge numbers for Cisneros tonight. We're not sure exactly how many votes are left there, but Cisneros does have a pocket of votes left. But if you add all that up together, then I'm telling you, here's the thing that appears most likely right now. Neither one of these candidates potentially could end up at 50%. And in Texas, if you don't hit 50% tonight, it would trigger a runoff. You see, there is a third candidate here getting about 5% of the vote. So the possibility looms when you look at the areas that are left where Cuellar can pick up some big votes here, boost that number, bring the Cisneros number down. You look at Cisneros with the potential to offset that in Bexar County. If there aren't enough votes there in Bexar County to boost her all the way up to 50%, you could be in a scenario here where these two candidates head into a runoff. The runoff would be held May 24th. It would be just the two of them. This would be a preview. Obviously, that would be a race with getting a lot of national attention. Again, one of the most conservative Democrats you're going to find in the House against a progressive challenger who nearly beat him 2 years ago. We could have a campaign here that extends to May. One other House race I want to highlight, a Republican member of Congress who found himself, I think, sweating during that speech a little bit. Let's switch this to the Republican side. The 3rd District of Texas, this is North Texas, and the incumbent here is Van Taylor. And again, the key is, because this doesn't look that close, look, he's up 51-26. The key is that runoff number. Does he finish above 50%? Does he avoid the runoff? Why would Van Taylor, an incumbent Republican here, be so close to falling into a runoff here? Van Taylor voted for the independent commission to investigate January 6th, the events of January 6th. He has found himself taking incredible heat from several primary opponents, from conservative activists in the district who have basically said this is about taking a Republican who was insufficiently loyal to Donald Trump out. Trump himself certainly hasn't endorsed Taylor, but has sort of stayed away from this race. The political danger for Taylor is, and you can see we're still awaiting more votes here, if Taylor slips below 50% here and gets into a runoff is triggered, that might whet the appetite of Trump and some of these more national Republican figures to take a shot at him in a one-on-one runoff situation. It might signal weakness if he falls below 50% here. There were a couple Republicans we were keeping an eye on in Texas tonight to see, they had maybe gotten crosswise a little bit of the Trump movement. Taylor is the one right now who's paying the biggest price on the Republican side by far. We'll see as these final votes come in if he can stay above 50% and avoid that runoff, because a runoff could get dicey for him.
Steve, can I just ask, there was so much attention heading into this with the new changed voting rules in Texas. Do we know enough yet about the way the vote's coming in to know whether we're having abnormally low turnout or we're having turnout numbers at all that are significantly different than they might have been in other primaries?
Yeah, it's always hard to tell in a primary because it's sort of unequal between the two parties. You didn't have, it's not like a presidential year where you got presidential election on both sides. Even in the gubernatorial race, I mean, just show you that the races that should draw out voters in big numbers here. Again, on the Republican side here, Greg Abbott, the incumbent, got some challengers. Not much of a race. He wins renomination. Beto O'Rourke had some opponents. Wow. He easily wins. O'Rourke versus Abbott, that race is now set for November. But you didn't have big races that were at the top of the ticket, drawing out voters sort of statewide for each party. This, in fact, I'll show you on the Republican side. This is the marquee statewide race. It's unresolved at the moment. Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, if you remember, he was the one who tried to put that first lawsuit together after the 2020 election, basically trying to overturn the 2020 election. Ken Paxton, also, he's been under indictment for years. Yes. He's had an indictment looming over his head. There's been an investigation around his office. He's drawn 3 challengers, including Congressman Louis Gohmert, a former justice on the state Supreme Court, and George P. Bush, the son of Jeb Bush. He's drawn 3 challengers. Now, Paxton is going to finish first here and advance to the runoff, but we are projecting he will not hit that 50% number. The suspense right now really seems to be here between Bush and Guzman. Who finishes second? Who would oppose Paxton in that runoff? Interestingly, if Bush right now, as you can see, is ahead here by about 50,000 votes for that second spot. If Bush doesn't end up in second, do you know where Bush's weakest place in the Republican primary in Texas has been tonight? Boy, what a story. It springs it all around. Houston, Harris County. It's where it all began for the Bush family in Texas. His grandfather, George H.W. Bush, launched his political career and built the modern Republican Party there. And that's where he's underperforming the most tonight in this Republican primary.
That is fascinating. And so much more still to come in as these numbers start to add up in Texas.